Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. I am very excited for today's video. I'm giving you my updated 2025 top 15 eyeshadow palettes of all time. I do like to update this video every year or so just because I feel like over time things change. I will post my video from last year and I feel like many of these palettes are still the same. I will preface this by saying in order for a palette to be listed as like a favorite palette of all time, it needed to be in my collection. Like, it couldn't have entered my collection 2024. So for example, I think the Bella Beauté Bar Poison Garden palette will turn into one of my favorite palettes of all time, but I've had it in my collection less than a year, so I don't want there to be any sort of like real recency bias, and I want these to be palettes that have been in my collection for a length of time that like I continue to go back to. So I have 15 to share with you guys. There are a couple new ones this year. There are a couple new ones. I honestly didn't look back to kind of see which ones were replaced by a couple of the new ones, but if you're interested, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel, or if you're already subscribed, I hope you will like, comment, and subscribe. Do all of the YouTube things, and then let's get into the video. I'm going to start with the 5. These are not like, I'm not ranking these. They're just, it's the top 15. I'm gonna actually 6. I'm gonna start with the 6 that I feel like will come as no surprise, but I want you to pause, put 3 down below, pause and comment and let me know 3 that you think are gonna be in the top 15. I always love reading your guys' comments because I feel like sometimes you guys know me better than I know myself. Like, I honestly do. Okay, so now that you've done that, thank you so much. Thank you for the comment. Thank you for the engagement. I appreciate it. Let's jump in. Okay, I think the one that, the 2 that will come as the least surprising. So up first, I have the Natasha Denona Mini Nude eyeshadow palette. Now, granted, this was not a palette that got a lot of love from me last year, but this is a palette that I have loved so much in the past that it was like completely broken to the point where I needed to purchase another one and replace it. It had a pan in at least one, if not multiple shades. So I do love this palette, and I am doing a no spend January, and it's kind of maybe starting to curb a little something. Maybe I'm not going to be buying every single new eyeshadow palette this year, so hopefully I can actually rotate through my palette collection a little bit more. And just knowing that this only got used twice last year is a little bit embarrassing to me, so I'm going to definitely make more of an effort to give myself permission to reach for this one more frequently this year. It is such a perfect just go-to palette. Just, you know, you've got 5 shades. You're not going to get the most looks out of it, but if I just don't want to think about my makeup and I just want something that I feel pretty in, this is such an easy reach, and so that one remains a tippity top favorite. And then I have my Natasha Denona Gold palette. Now, granted, you can't get this one anymore. You can get the golden, but what would be missing from the golden would be these 2 shades, which I do love. Now, I will also say Alter Ego does make a dupe to this. That is like one of the few Alter Ego palettes I don't have, so I can't necessarily speak to the, you know, exact dupiness of it or the quality of that Alter Ego palette, but overall I do love Alter Ego's quality. So if you missed out on this color story specifically, you could look at Alter Ego. This I love the most. This palette I do attribute to helping me fall in love with green eyeshadow, so there's that. But then I love the mattes in this palette. They are like my perfect everyday neutral, warm leaning matte brown shadows. And honestly, if I only had these 4 mattes in my life, these 4, even 5, like I like this one, but I don't use that one that much, I think I would be fine. Like, I think I would be okay. I love the matte brown shadows in this palette, so this one remains a favorite. All right, then I have the Persona Identity 1 palette. I've raved about this palette for years on my channel, and this is one I feel like I need a replacement. This shade, or this pan, kind of fell out on me, and it was like the deep brown shade. I really enjoy having that deep brown in this palette, so I am thinking about potentially getting a replacement for this palette this year. But before I did so, I kind of wanted to finish the shade Humble up here, which I've been working on for so long. I reached for this palette 100 times last year, Many of those uses was to reach for the shade Humble, but I also love this palette. Again, the mattes are excellent quality, but I love the metallics in this palette because they do pack a punch on the lids, but they're so smooth. It's such a stunning palette. You can wear this for every day, but also for glam looks, for going out. When you want something that's like, I don't want to say like a little bit more mature, but like it's not going to be this super textured sparkly shadow, but you are still going to get a really impactful, just beautiful glam look. I love this palette, so this one also remains a favorite. And then I have my NARS Summer Solstice eyeshadow palette. I love this palette. This has a lot of like core memories tied to it. Like I wore this palette to my daughter's first grade graduation, which was special to me, obviously, as her mother. But I really love this palette because there's only 2 mattes in here, but I really enjoy the mattes. And then I love the lid toppers in here. I love these 2 top shadows. This is one of my favorite lid topper shades in my entire collection. I really like this lid topper, like golden shade here in the corner. Yes, it's only 9 warm toned eyeshadows, but it's one of those palettes, again, that you don't really have to think about. I'm gonna feel pretty with the look that I create. I just love this palette. So this one also remains a favorite. This one has been a favorite for a long time as well. This is the Kaleidos Futurism 7 Sashimi City. I think they still sell this. I could be wrong. I think they do. I think this is like one of the few Futurism palettes they still sell. I freaking love this. Again, a little bit one noted. You're only getting 7 shadows, but the quality of the mattes is excellent. I love the shade selection for the mattes, but then obviously it is the like metallic shadows that steal the show for me. They are so sparkly. They are definitely like, they're not subtle. If you like something a little bit more subtle, these are not going to be the shadows for you, but they're so sparkly. I love this duochrome, like pink to gold. I swear this is like my first like favorite, like this is one of the pink duochrome shadows that kind of like made me fall in love with duochromes like this. And then obviously I have a pan in this shadow. This is like a peach to a green, kind of reminds me of Peachy Keen from JD Glow, but this one is more sparkly. Oh, I love this palette so much. I get a compliment every single time I wear this palette, so that also remains a favorite. And then the 6th is my Viseart Soleil Le Plage eyeshadow palette. I just love this, again, for simplicity purposes. We've got some matte browns, some matte neutral browns that, again, if these were like the only matte browns in my collection, I think it'd be okay. I'd be devastated, but it would be okay. I mean, honestly, it would be okay because nobody needs makeup, but I really like the selection of the matte browns in here. And then I love yellow. Like, I love yellow. So I like that we have this pale yellow up in the corner here that we can use as an inner corner highlight. It is a matte. And then I also love this kind of like, okay, it is like a metallic yellow, but it is more of like a, I don't want to say it's a satin because it's not, but it's a more sheer metallic, but it almost has like a green, a bit of like a green base to it. So it has like a bit of a flip to it. It's so pretty. I also really like, this one is more of like a white yellow. There's definitely some shades in here speaking to my little yellow heart. So I really love this palette. This one also remains a favorite. And then I'm almost positive that this has been a favorite as well. It's my Pat McGrath Bronze Seduction. I preface this by saying this is a favorite, but I don't encourage spending $128 on Bronze Seduction. Wait until you can get it on sale. But I love this palette because, again, I attribute these couple shades up here to making me fall in love with green eyeshadow. And I like that we have browns as opposed to like pinks in this palette. I also really enjoy this gold shade. I talk about that all the time. I will say these 2 shades up here, not exactly my favorite, but even this like deeper satin sort of shade I think is really beautiful. And this is a palette I reach into. I talk about this a lot, but if I have a green look that I feel like is just not fully coming together, I'll reach into this palette just for this shadow up here, which I love this palette for that shadow. So this also remains a favorite. I've talked about the Rowan Quads a lot on my channel. My tippity top favorite is the 1111. This is a palette that my daughter destroyed because she was doing some sort of like challenge or experiment. The palette got ruined in that experiment, and so I went and bought another one because I love this palette so much. I love the like cool toned pink metallic. These are 4 cream shadows. I always say they're not going to be for everyone, but if you like something textured on the lids, this is so pretty. Also, because I'm getting more and more into like cool tones and blues, I think this shade is really pretty. But I like that we have 2 cools and 2 warm tone shadows. Actually, this one I feel like could be considered more cool tone. But anyway, I love the 1111 quad. Oh, and then I think we all knew this is my favorite palette of all time, and they are coming out with another one. I learned via their Instagram that it is going to be a 20 pan palette. This is the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural. It's going to be 20 pans, and they're bringing new shades. So obviously I'll be needing both. I'm so happy they're bringing this back because I talk about this palette quite a bit, but I always feel bad because you can't get it anymore. But I think this is so freaking pretty. This comes traveling with me all the time, and my favorite thing about this palette is the mattes are more buildable, which works for me because sometimes we can get a little out of control with our eyeshadow. So I love that the mattes are a buildable formula, but the metallics in here are so sparkly, so metallic, and so punchy on the lids. So pretty. I love the metallics in this palette. But I also like that we have a range of different kind of directions we can take this palette. We have greens, we've got like dusty purples, we've got neutral shadows. With this shade right here and this shade right here, you can take this pretty cool toned as well. I love this palette so much, you guys. I love it. OG staple, we've got the Tartelette in Bloom. This is another palette I have literally repurchased because I wanted it in my life. This is one of the first palettes that I purchased when I was getting into makeup, and eventually it got old and I needed to declutter it, but then I missed having it in my life. And you guys, I'm terrified because I know they have like a little Tartelette now, like a little Tartelette in Bloom, but it's not actually the Tartelette in Bloom, I swear. It's just like, I swear Tarte has these like 6-pan unicartons. They all have the same, like, do a little research and I swear you guys will find this too. They all have like the same names in the 6-pan unicartons, but I swear they just like change the cover and like name it something different, but the pan names I swear are the same. Anyway, I think Tartelette in Bloom is no longer, which really makes me sad. The shade is Smarty Pants is like my perfect just crease shadow, especially if I just want like one shadow in the crease. Perfect crease shadow for that. And this is not going to be the most exciting palette, but you really can just follow the rose if you don't know what you want to do. It's perfect for every day. It's another one of those palettes, if you don't really want to think about your makeup, it's such a perfect one for that. So Tartelette in Bloom, I don't know if I called this a favorite last year, but like it definitely is. I think this is new to this year, but using it last year and like finishing it, no pan left behind, and then still wanting to reach for it, the Tiny Marvels palette, the Sydney Grace Tiny Marvels palette. First of all, the quality is just excellent, both the mattes and the shimmers. We've talked a lot about how I love a blue, I love a green. I love the blue brown shade in here. It's one of my favorite blue browns in my entire collection. I also love a lavender. Periwinkle and lavender are like my 2 favorite colors just in general, like in life, not necessarily in makeup, but I love that we have this like lavender purple here. The shade Marvel is such a beautiful rose gold metallic shadow. I love the shade Fire Butts for green, and these two together, chef's kiss. One of my favorite looks that I created last year, I used this palette. This is something I'm really excited to reach for again this year, and I just honestly think you really can't go wrong. What I love about this is there is a good mix of like neutrals and colors. There is, you know, a variety of different directions you can take the color. It's not just like a neutral palette with a pop of color. Like, we've got a pop of green, we've got a pop of purple, we have a blue brown, we have a green metallic, we have this pop of like a yellow gold, we have this like coral pinky shadow. So I just think this is such a versatile palette, and this is another one of those palettes that I know, like, I have looks that I have in my mind that I can reach into and create with this palette that I know I'm gonna feel really pretty in. So this is definitely an all-time favorite. I would never want to get rid of this palette, so that is a tippity top fave. This couldn't be a favorite last year, but it can this year because now it's been in my collection for over a year. And I will say, just any Danessa Myricks palette, in my opinion, is like a top favorite palette in my collection. But I'm going with the 5 over the 4 and over the 3, which would be eligible, the 6 wouldn't. Because first of all, this has more options than those 2 palettes. Second of all, the 4 has like the 4 shadows in the middle are like the water activated shadows. So just not the most user friendly. But I love this because there's just, again, such a variety of directions that you can take this palette. There's so many different finishes, textures, tones, etc. And I just love it so much. I love that we have blues, greens, purples, oranges. These two shadows for, oh my gosh, like a fiery orange, like warm smoky eye in the summer. I remember reaching into Radiant this summer. Cannot wait to do that again. So I know you cannot get this one anymore, but like I highly recommend whenever Danessa Myricks does a Groundworks palette, or sorry, not a Groundwork, a Lightwork palette. I just couldn't recommend enough, especially if you're someone who's like wanting to try special shadows, but like maybe you don't want to order from an indie site because you're a little bit leery and a little bit hesitant. This is a great way to try like an indie brand, but like that is also mainstream, so that's Sephora. Love Danessa Myricks palettes. Okay, this has been an all-time favorite basically since I got this. I remember getting this palette. This is the ColourPop Limoncello. I got this the day that we were leaving for a South Dakota trip, and I brought it with, and I had so much fun creating looks in South Dakota. Is it the Black Hills? Yes. I have very fond memories with this eyeshadow palette, but this has remained a favorite because even when we returned back from South Dakota, I was reaching for this for like weeks on end. My palette collection was not as large at the time, but I just couldn't put this away. I love this because there's blue, which granted, this is definitely not my most used blue in my collection. We also have green and we have yellow. I love the shade Serenade. I pulled this out last year, and I will say, now that I'm like so into indie, this definitely doesn't give me like the impactful punchiness of say like a Bella Beauté bar palette, but for a more subtle everyday approach, I still think this palette is so beautiful. I love the selection of like the warm mattes. I like that we have this like almost like orangey brown. We have the yellow matte, but oh, Serenade we have. I also really like the shade Fly Girl. It's this really beautiful kind of peachy orange, a little bit shifty shadow. It's so pretty. I love this palette. I also just love the outer packaging. It just makes me think of springtime. That remains a top favorite palette. Granted, it's not going to give me the punchiness that I'm looking for more these days, but honestly, we should tone it back a little bit for work. So for work appropriate looks, it's excellent. Okay, the Huda Rose Quartz palette. This one is definitely a little bit different than many of the other palettes that I've talked about, because this is more of like a pink palette, more romantic in tone. I love the shade Blissful, Moon Magic, Energize. Like, I love the different metallic shadows in here. Again, quite a few different textures and tones within this palette. It's not my most reached for palette because I typically tend to do something that is like more, whether it be warm browns, neutral browns, or cool toned browns. I typically reach for browns more frequently than like rosy tones, but every time I create a look with this palette, it gives this really beautiful, just like ethereal, almost like fairy-like feel to the eyes, and I just love it. So I wanted to mention that one. The Natasha Denona Biba. I feel like this was a favorite, and then this really got neglected. In the last couple of years, I pulled this out to No Pan Left Behind it, and it's just such a great everyday basic kind of workhouse sort of palette. For me, this feels more like either an everyday palette or a palette that I would complement like single shadows with, or a palette that I would create like my base look with, but then I would reach into like an indie palette for a special shadow. I love this palette for the mattes. I will say I don't love like these three shades right here, just because I'm not typically doing like a gray smoky eye, but I really love the mattes in this palette. Like, I love these top three brown mattes. This one again is kind of more of like a yellowy orangey matte. Like, I love that. I love this red toned matte brown, and even the shade Monroe and the shade Rustic I think are beautiful. Again, not going to be quite as metallic and quite as punchy on the eyes as some of the things that I'm used to now, but for just a basic B palette, I love this one. This is such a staple. I would never want to get rid of this one either, just especially for fall time, like the fall tones. Like, it's a palette that's never going to do me dirty. It's not going to give me this like flashy look, but again, for every day or just like something a little bit more, I don't want to even say subdued, it's never going to do me dirty, especially when it comes to like the mattes. So I love that one. Okay, This is not a palette I would have thought would have been a favorite up until last year when I pulled this out to do this No Pan Left Behind and realized how into like warm browns I really have. Like I do love my cool tone browns because I love like blues and I love to match cool tone browns with blues. But I feel so pretty in like a warm brown anything. And I had so much fun with this palette. This is something that I've gotten very excited to pull out this year, and it is my Alter Ego Canyon palette, which is the dupe to the Natasha Denona Bronze palette, which I actually don't own. And I just love this. The quality in all of the shadows in this palette I think is so great. I love that we have a good mix of both mattes and shimmers, and the shimmers in here are fairly metallic and fairly punchy on the eyes, especially for kind of like a dupe to a Natasha Denona palette. I love the shade Cougar and Coyote, as well as like even Rust and Sear, I think are so beautiful. I created some looks that I just absolutely loved last year. And again, I love the selection of mattes in here. I like that we have, you know, this deep kind of red brown shade, but I also like that we have Rattlesnake, which definitely works. Even if I just wanted like one shadow in the crease that was a little bit more warm, I love Rattlesnake. This is just such a good palette at such a great price. I'm so pleased with this one, and this is a new favorite in my collection. After that, you guys, those are my top 15 eyeshadow palettes of all time currently in my collection. I would love to know in the comments below, what are your current like top 3 to 5 eyeshadow palettes? Let a girl know in the comments below. Other than that, thank you so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting me and my channel as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.